Welcome back to Sports Time HQ. I am your host, Fernando. Joined with me today is my great co-host, Gary. Keith not with us once again this week. Trying to figure out a little cool sound effect to mention he's not here, but this is me saying it. He's been benched for another week. Hopefully he'll be back next week. But again, Gary, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. I was out late last night watching my Browns in a back and forth battle. Um, couldn't get it done, unfortunately, but hey, maybe it's a blessing in disguise for the tankathon.
I watching those highlights, man. I saw it was a 16-minute highlight clip. I was like, oh, this must have been a good game.
Yeah.
Because usually if it's not a good game, it's like 11, 12 minutes. But 16, I was so hyped for it. And it was just back and forth. Jameis Winston had a typical Jameis Winston showdown prime time.
Pretty much.
Is Jameis the future for the Cleveland Browns?
I mean, I honestly will riot if we don't bring him back next year because he's shown us that, at least football is fun to watch again. I mean, the first few weeks I was watching this year with Deshaun at quarterback, I despised getting up and waking up at whatever time for Sunday morning and watching these guys play. But now I'm, excited to see what this Browns team brings me every day. I obviously want them to continue to lose for the tankathon. However, I just, like I said, want to have fun watching football once again, and Jameis does for me. So,
hey, I mean, my Patriots, they got the script, and the script was make sure you lose.
Okay.
Very close.
Yeah, it was a good game too.
Definitely a good game. Obviously, we'll talk more about Thursday Night Football predictions because Gary's going to be very, very excited. Maybe he'll even intro it. I don't know. I might as well give some credit to him. But let's dive into some news and notes from around the league. And first off, we'll start with a scary injury that we saw with the Texans and, of course, Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars. Outside linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair has been suspended for 3 games for an illegal hit on Trevor Lawrence. And we'll go into the injuries later on, but do want to mention that Trevor Lawrence is in concussion protocol. And obviously that is something to monitor this week.
Yeah, it was definitely a rough situation. T-Law looked like he was going down fairly early. I don't really think any NFL player besides Al-Shaair maybe will say that he went down late. I think that was probably one of the better slides that I see from quarterbacks nowadays. So it was just a kind of a late hit and bad situation that happened. Al-Shaair apologized for it, but you saw T-Law immediately in that fencing position with his hands up, and it's not exactly what you want to see as a fan. So sucks. I wish him a speedy recovery, and
Yeah, hopefully he is back out there and clearing concussion protocol as soon as possible in order to be able to play and keep going. But they could also shut him down for the rest of the season. I mean, the Jaguars have looked horrendous, and why try and risk your quarterback getting further of an injury in a concussion or anything else, because he was dealing with a shoulder injury a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Moving on to the Steelers. Well, I mean, I didn't think they were going to win this game. I think they are actually the only game that I got wrong this week in my predictions. The Steelers tied the NFL record for their 21st straight non-losing season, 18th under Mike Tomlin. The other team to do their 21st straight non-losing seasons was the Cowboys way back in the day when they were, I guess, good, and then I think 18 is in third place right now, and that's the Patriots until 2019 when we lost Brady afterwards.
Yeah, it's a crazy stretch of games or seasons, and the Steelers, pretty big surprise to a lot of NFL fans. I mean, everybody always picks them to, finish around that 3rd or even 4th spot in the AFC North as of recent, but they continue to prove everybody wrong, which sucks, but this year they look like a really good team. I think that they're pretenders. I think they're going to lose first round of the playoffs potentially. But as of right now, Russ is slinging the ball. Looks really good. Him and George Pickens have seem to found a connection. So we'll see how long that lasts.
I mean, it's just to think. I mean, it's a very tough division that they're in too.
Yeah.
The Bengals, I mean, they have a god awful record, but I mean, the team is actually really, really good. They've scored, I think, in 5 games, they scored 28, 29 plus points, and they've lost every one of those games.
It's just the defense. The defense is so bad. Outside of a few guys like Trey Hendrickson, Cam Taylor-Britt, a couple other guys, whatever. I won't spend too much time on that. The defense as a whole is just terrible. So I feel bad for Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase because you see every week they're trying their hardest to do whatever they can to win games, but the defense is just not good. And that's the biggest reason why this year I was so confused as to why people would pick them as Super Bowl, their Super Bowl picks, let alone even get there, because you need at least top half defense to win a Super Bowl, and the Bengals are nowhere near that.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that. And it looks like the Bengals are going to have to try and improve and basically see the season as a loss unless somehow miraculously they can come back. Yeah. But I highly doubt it. Yeah. Daniel Jones, this is the 3rd straight week we're talking about him, but he's found a home. He's going to the Minnesota Vikings. And it was honestly very, very crazy because I wasn't expecting him to go to the Vikings out of all teams. But again, the Vikings, I think, only pay him $370,000. So realistically, I mean, you're fine. You're sitting 2nd string right now behind Sam Darnold. But Gary, my question to you, obviously after your reaction to this, is what happens to Sam Darnold after this season?
That's a good
question. With J.J. McCarthy, of course, there as well.
Right. That is a good question. It'll definitely be something to look at because Sam Darnold's playing the best ball of his career right now, something that nobody really saw coming. Career resurgence is definitely a thing, and we're seeing it here. And he definitely is in a prime spot to get a bag, I guess, next year. He's, 30 years old maybe? 29. So it's not like he's, going to be out of the league in 2 years. So I think that there'll definitely be some teams that are in a prime position to get a quarterback and make a playoff push that will be foaming at the mouth to try to sign this guy. So I think I don't think he's going to stay, to be completely honest with you. I think unless the Vikings, want to continue this push, but at the same time, they spent a lot of draft capital on J.J. McCarthy. Do they have faith in him, especially after this ACL injury that he had? It'll be definitely something to keep an eye on. But I think personally, Sam Darnold will get a lot of money.
Yeah, I think I couldn't tell you off the top of my head because I can't remember where I saw it, but I think it might have been Spot Track that they were projecting Sam Darnold. He could get, 3 to 5 year contract and north of maybe $25 million a year.
Yeah, I was going to say, probably somewhere around 25 to 27 million. Yeah.
Yeah. So, J.J. McCarthy, though, do you see him being the future of the Vikings still?
I mean, you know how I feel about that. I never liked them going into the draft. I know you loved him. We'll see. It'll definitely be harder because now you would have to think he's even potentially lesser than what he was just due to the fact that he got that ACL injury. So obviously never want to see a player get hurt. So I hope he's able to come back from that injury fully. But I'm personally not a big JJ guy, so we'll just have to see.
All right. Interesting. Let's go on to some injuries. And, of course, the Trevor Lawrence injury we already talked about and how he's in concussion protocol, and we're wishing him a speedy recovery. Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason, the two top on the list for running backs, the only two that I was able to find. Christian McCaffrey, non-contact PCL injury. The Niners have officially placed him on injury reserve, and the running back is expected to miss 6 weeks. And, of course, Jordan Mason, ankle sprain. He also lands on the IR, and he's expected to miss at least 4 games on IR. And, I mean, for all you people that drafted Christian McCaffrey at 101, well, at least it wasn't an all-so-bad season. You managed to get him for a couple games. That's about it, though.
Yeah, it definitely sucks. you're probably thinking that, oh, if I could just get to the playoffs or in a spot to fight for a playoff spot and CMC comes back, which is probably what happened for a lot of teams. Good. I'm in a great position. I'll have McCaffrey for the playoffs and, could be in a league-winning spot. Then he goes down again. So I definitely feel for these, one-on-one drafters. Sucks, but, if you're able to win this year, even with drafting McCaffrey one-on-one, just makes it all the more sweeter.
Yeah, I mean, do you see Christian McCaffrey being a top 2 or 3 round running back being drafted next year, given the news comes out he's fully healthy?
Yeah, I would still.
Really?
You said top 2 or 3 rounds? I would definitely still.
So you still see it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you got to think, like when he is healthy, he's by far the best running back and is probably the best fantasy player all around. So I don't see a world where he's not drafted up there. But yeah.
I mean, I'm only saying it because obviously we thought that he was going to be fully healthy coming into the season, and then next thing you know, he's not. And then of course now we know the whole entire injury report from him this season. So you're still willing to take a chance. Are you still willing to take him as your first running back? How about that?
I would be definitely hesitant. However, I feel like the entire time like draft season was around, there were rumors swirling that, he's going to miss a couple games. If there were reports to say, come around this year that there's absolutely no chance he's going to miss the first couple games or, there were no injuries in practice, whatever it was, then I have no problem with taking him as my first running back. But if there are, reports saying that it's possible that he could miss some games, then yeah, I would certainly be hesitant. I probably wouldn't take him. Like I said, this year my first overall pick was CeeDee Lamb, and even that turned out to be kind of a rough topic, but definitely ended up better than Christian McCaffrey.
Okay, good to know. Obviously, Jordan Mason, I mean, he's another one that did you really well when you had him on your team earlier this season. Obviously now a shocking guy who's going to miss some time as well. And he was actually my waiver wire running back out of the week. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, he had that ankle injury and, there he goes. Yep. So we'll see. We'll talk about the next running back on that depth chart and who you should be picking up in your waivers this week in a little bit. But wide receivers, real quick, Rashad Bateman and Ladd McConkey both dealing with knee injuries. Bateman was out for week 13. He was inactive. And Ladd McConkey left in the fourth quarter. Just, I want to say two guys you got to monitor this week, right, Gary?
Oh, for sure. And especially if you're Zay Flowers owner. I mean, I'm a Zay Flowers owner, and I feel like every time I watch the Ravens, for some reason, the deep targets go to Rashad Bateman. He's been coming alive this season. He's been Lamar's go-to guy, to be completely honest with you. So if he's out, and that just opens up, you would think, so much more opportunities for Zay Flowers. I think, like I had said, if Bateman is to miss time, then Zay Flowers he has the upside to be a top 5 receiver, in my personal opinion, every week.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. And obviously Quentin Johnston, I mean, he's not really doing much of anything. So Ladd McConkey needs to be back, especially if you have Justin Herbert, who we've noticed has been producing very well late in the year.
Yeah, Ladd McConkey especially just had a huge game. I forgot exactly what the numbers were, but I think he went for 9 for like 117 or something like that. So Herbert needs him back.
Yeah. Hopefully Bateman's back as well for Lamar. And then going into some tight ends, Dallas Goedert, knee injury, left game in the fourth quarter. And Taysom Hill, the man, the myth, the legend. He is not invincible. He unfortunately suffered a torn ACL, and it is reported that he also has more additional damage. So he is out for the season, and I think that's a big blow to fantasy managers who were seeing some Taysom Hill upside.
Yeah, so to talk about Goddard, it kind of sucks because for the first 3 or 4 weeks, I think he was tight end 1, and then he ended up getting injured. I don't know if it was the same knee or if it was a different injury, but he goes down for a little bit, comes back last week, had solid game. I think 4 for 40 and a touchdown. So definitely a guy that I feel like could be one of the top tight ends if he is to stay healthy. However, he's had that red Q next to his name for I feel like the entire season. So sucks there. Taysom Hill, he's also been dealing with injuries in the entire year. He's been back and forth out of the hospital with a chest injury. Now he's done for the year at the ACL. So definitely sucks for some fantasy managers who felt like they found a diamond in the rough in Taysom Hill off the waiver wire. They'll have to look elsewhere.
Yeah. Really tough injuries. Godert's also been very he's been popping off in fantasy when he's healthy.
Yeah.
But again, like you mentioned, always has that Q.
Yeah,
always.
Exactly.
Gary, you got any more news, notes, injuries?
Nope. Let's get into it.
All right. Let's get into where everyone wants to come and talk and see what kind of guys you need to be adding on your waiver wire week this week. Gary, this is a big week. It's week 14. And that means this is the final week before playoffs for, I want to say 95% of everyone. But obviously there is that 5% that wants to play week 18 championship.
We're in a prime spot here. If you're sitting at 7-6 and you're right on the cusp, you're right on the bubble, you need to listen up.
Should we just mention real quick the listener league and how that league's doing?
Honestly, I think I just lost. So I don't know.
You actually came back.
Oh, because Scooty, right?
Yes. You came back and managed to beat Tactical, who was actually in second place at the time.
Yes.
By 6 points. So you have that one win, and that allows you to possibly sneak into the playoffs. But I hate to break it to you, Gary. I think you've been eliminated from the playoff contentions.
I think I need to beat the notorious one. Or I think I need to win this week and have more points than him, unless he beat me in a head-to-head. I don't know.
Yeah. I have officially clinched playoffs and the number 1 seed after you beat Tactical, so I really appreciate it very, very much.
No problem.
The road to the championship trophy, I tell you.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I lost in my work league, in one of my work leagues, to this person who had the 101 draft pick. She's currently undefeated still.
Wow.
She's 13-0.
That's wild.
She has done 0 waiver wire pickups.
Really?
0.
Wow.
Can you believe that? I've never seen that before in my life.
No, that's very crazy, but props to her.
Yeah. So I was talking smack to her for the last couple of weeks saying you're going to lose week 13 to me. But it did not end up being the case. I ended up losing to her. But I do want to mention before we quickly dive into the quarterback ads of the week, this is the last bye week as well. So teams who are looking to try and sneak into the playoffs are dealing with a lot of big teams going on to a bye week. I mean, doing waiver wires this week was horrendous, trying to find some players because you obviously want to pick up guys right now who can win now, help you win now. And there was some guys I was looking at and I was like, well, can't go with him because he's on a bye week. Can't go with him. He's on a bye week. This week it is Baltimore, Denver, Houston, Indianapolis, New England, and Washington.
Yeah, those are some big teams, especially if you need guys like Lamar, Derrick Henry, Flowers, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now, but Mixon, even if
you forgot about Mixon.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe I forgot about Mixon too. But even if you're forced to start guys like Stroud and Richardson, that you might have needed a miraculous week from, Jaden Daniels, not going to have him to play. So,
yeah, I mean, I think the only team that's really irrelevant is the New England Patriots for fantasy.
Probably, yeah.
But let's start with my guy, and my guy is a younger player. Might be a rookie too. Caleb Williams. He's had a QB4 finish in 2 straight weeks. He hasn't thrown an interception in 6 weeks, and the last time was in London against Jacksonville. Gary, I was there at that game. He has not thrown an interception since that game.
That's crazy.
Tough matchup coming up against San Francisco, but again, I do want to mention that their team is looking horrendous, and I don't know if they actually want to win right now. Maybe just try and fall in the draft. But their defense also has been deteriorating in the past, this whole season, really. And Allen just put up 28.4 points this past week, given it was in the snow, and he did have a receiving touchdown, a passing touchdown, and a rushing touchdown. Props to him. But you can expect Caleb Williams, I believe, to have another top 10 week performance.
I like it. I liked him coming into this year. I thought that there's absolutely no way that he could struggle in this Bears system. Maybe I was wrong and quick to pull the trigger there, but yeah, as of recent, he's looked so much better. Maybe he's finally starting to find that, find the flair that I figured he would have coming into this year. Eberflus is gone, so maybe that gives him even more resurgence to keep playing hard. But yeah, I like the shout here. I think that he should not be on waivers. So
yeah. Keith's pick, Will Levis is his pick. And it's an interesting one because I wouldn't have expected Levis to be talked about. But if you look at his stats, in the last 4 weeks since coming back from his injury that he faced earlier this season, he's had a QB2 type of performance. Top 24 quarterback performance, one time in the top 10, twice in the top 13, 14. The reason why I'm saying that this is a fine pick, not a star-studded pick, I think I'm fine because of the matchups. Levis's future matchups is Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, and then Jacksonville to finish off in your Week 17 playoffs, and Houston in your Week 18 playoff championship. So very, very favorable matchups for Levis.
I honestly like it because I was thinking about picking him as my player, to be completely honest.
Really?
Yeah, the past 2 games he's been playing better, as much as I hate to admit it because I'm not a fan of him. I don't think it's going to continue, but I mean, if we're just going off the past weeks, that's really all we do here when we look at these players. Then Will Levis is one of the better guys to get right now. So
yeah, and he has put up 16 plus points in 4 straight weeks.
Yeah, solid.
Pretty consistent. Might be better than CJ Stroud this year.
Yep,
honestly.
Probably.
Let's round off the QB ads of the week with your guy, and this guy is also a pretty young player, isn't he?
He is. He's in his second year, and I can't believe I'm going to say it, but my pick of the week is Bryce Young. Yeah, you heard me right. I mean, he's been absolutely balling as of recent. Is it because he now has a healthy veteran wideout in Adam Thielen, who, by the way, is coming off of a great performance, 100 yards and a touchdown? Or is it because he's feeling more confident now that there's absolutely nothing to play for? Personally, I don't know, but he hasn't thrown a pick in 3 games, which is something that he struggled with last year and early on this year, resulting in him being benched. But like I said, he's been balling out as of recent. He's coming off a 23.6-point performance. So, I mean, hey, like I said, he's looked better. If there's absolutely nobody on the waiver wires that you have faith in, I'm starting to slowly have trust in Bryce Young, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't hate getting him at all. He's got a tough matchup in Philly next week, but the past 3 or 4 weeks, quarterbacks have done pretty well against him. I think the worst quarterback performance was Stafford, who put up 19. So
here's my only concern. Given he's been doing really, really well this past couple of weeks, and really since getting benched and coming back, my only concern is he's going against Philadelphia next week, who is a very tough matchup to fantasy quarterbacks. But he has been producing very well. I'll give him that. And I was very surprised that he has been doing well. But I want to see what happens with Philly, because I think this is a true test to him as a future quarterback possibility for a team, and if he can still produce in fantasy versus tough matchup teams.
Yeah, understandable. I completely get it. I mean, at the end of the day, like, he just went up against Tampa Bay, who I don't think is a great defense in terms of quarterback play. However, he did go for almost 20 points against Kansas City, so it's not like He just had this one game randomly against the Buccaneers. He did it back-to-back weeks. He's been playing pretty solid. So, like I said, I think the biggest thing that sticks out to me is the fact that he hasn't thrown a pick in 3 weeks, because I feel like all of Bryce Young's career, the stat that's carried with him is he throws more picks than he throws more picks than touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, he loves throwing picks. That is one thing he does do, but that is true. I'm very impressed that he hasn't thrown one in 3 weeks. Maybe it'll come this week against Philly.
Possibly.
But those are our top quarterback ads of the week. Caleb Williams, Will Levis, and Bryce Young, which I want to mention are all at least in their second year or earlier.
Yep.
Or third, actually, because Will Levis is third.
Third.
Really young players, though, in general.
Yeah.
Let's go into our running back ads of the week. Gary, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so my guy is, again, maybe a guy that you weren't expecting to hear. We're constantly talking about how bad the running back position is for the waiver wire. So I kind of looked around and I did some research. My guy's Ray Davis. Now, you may think, oh, he's just coming off this one game that he just had, which is pretty solid. Playing in the snow, dropped 13.7 points, had 11 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown to be exact. However, he's my pick of the week because he's now had double-digit fantasy performances in 4 of the last 7 weeks, with 2 of those 4 being 17-plus points. I think that he could be a solid plug-and-play flex player. And I feel like if, I'm not going to say, because James Cook is young too, I'm not going to say he's just going to go somewhere else and turn to trash. What I'm saying is, if Ray Davis is to get a solidified role in this offense or any other offense for the rest of his career, I think that he could be a really, really solid and notable fantasy player.
Yeah, I don't hate it, actually. I actually was bouncing between Ray Davis or my guy, and then you ended up taking Ray Davis, so I was perfectly fine with it. But Davis has been really producing, and obviously it was a snowy game, so obviously there was more game ball on the ground versus in the air. But still, when Ray Davis had the ball, he was producing and he had great yards per carry. And those are numbers you want to see and you want to see improve and continue to improve. And I think we've talked about Ray Davis many times already this season. And I think I agree with you. I think he should be a good flex player because you're in a high-powered offense as well.
Yeah.
I'll go with my guy, and this has been your guy earlier this season. And I was actually very surprised you didn't talk about him. I was very, very surprised. I thought you were going to pick him. Well, this guy, 69% owned, 10.4 points this past week. Jaylen Warren is my guy, and it's Gary's guy, so hopefully he'll agree with me. 3 straight weeks, 10-plus points. Only 3 carries this week. I thought that was very odd to see that he only had 3 carries. But he did finish as an RB2 on average last 4 weeks, so top 24 running back. He's got a mid matchup against Cleveland, who gave up 24 points to the running backs of Denver. But I can see it happening slightly better this upcoming week against Cleveland. Sorry, Gary, not to trash your Cleveland defense. But I do think that Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, it's going to be 2 tough matchups for them. I still think they're going to be able to produce because of how good the Pittsburgh offense is.
No, it's totally fine. I completely agree with you. Also, I think people don't know this. Jaylen Warren is a Browns killer. Ever since he's gone there, he's been pretty good against us in the few games that he's played against us. I think this year he put up 14 fantasy points, which is the most of his season against us. So I think that I am starting him at my flex this week. Honestly, I think he could have another 15-point week, which is which you'd be very, very happy with from your flex, especially if it's a guy that you're getting off the waivers. So I have nothing to hate about it. He's been my guy all year. Like I said, the production and the help wasn't there first half of the season. Second half is slowly starting to pick up for Jaylen Warren.
You mentioned how Cleveland's always been Warren's been always a torch to Cleveland. So when he did face Cleveland 2 weeks ago, he did put up 15.4 points, and he finishes the RB11 on the week. You date back to last season. Facing Cleveland, finished the top 24 running back, RB19, in fact, 12.6 points. And then in week 11 last season against Cleveland, he finished with 23.5 fantasy points, enough to be the RB2 that week.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, well, I don't think I said it. He's been a Browns killer since he started playing for Pittsburgh. So I never hesitate to start him, especially when it's against Cleveland.
Yeah, 100%. I do want to mention a quick stat that I just saw by CBS Sports. Jameis Winston's averages from his 5 starts this season over a 17-game span, he would have 34 touchdowns, 24 interceptions. So a typical Jameis Winston season.
How many yards?
5,712 passing yards, which would be a new NFL single season record.
That's insane.
Imagine.
Absolutely insane. Yeah, I mean, I was just talking about it with my roommate last night. I try my best to defend the Deshaun Watson trade because when you're in a position like we were, you kind of have to. We gave up so much for him, and the position that we were in, we needed to make the move that we did. We needed to upgrade a quarterback, and at the time, it looked like Deshaun was that because when he was playing, he was a top 5 quarterback. But looking back at it, I mean, if we were starting Jameis Winston from the get-go, we're probably 500 team right now fighting for a playoff spot. So, it definitely sucks, but at the same time, it gives me hope that if he was to be brought back and he was to be started, which I doubt will happen because we never make the right decisions, with a good draft, I think that we can be fighting for a playoff spot for the next few years. So,
yeah, I'm intrigued to see what happens with Cleveland in the draft for sure as well.
Yeah.
Keith's pick. Gary, are you intrigued to talk about this guy? Because I think this guy is going to be one of the top waiver wire ads of the week.
Yeah, I think on Sleeper, he's the number 1 trending guy right now in terms of ads. It's Isaac Guerrero. I mean, there's nothing you can really say. I mean, the top 2 guys in that backfield just went down. So it's Isaac Guerrero and absolutely nobody else in San Fran. The running game as a whole all year has been good for San Fran. They got one of the better offensive lines in the game. So you kind of have to expect him to do good, being the top guy there. Just had 8 points. I think he scored a touchdown, right? Last game. So in the short amount of time that he played last game, he scored a touchdown. I think that if you're getting Isaac Guerrero in the waiver wire, especially if you were already in playoffs and or on the bubble to make playoffs and you get into playoffs, Isaac Guerrero can definitely be a league winner.
Yeah, I mean, I think just based solely on how good San Fran's line is and how the running backs have always consistently been doing amazing, I think it's a no doubt. If you need a running back, which I'm sure people do, he is going to be the guy that I think can help you finish your playoffs and your fantasy football season. Could be also a league winner, and I would be spending all my fab if you play in a league with fab.
For sure.
Jaylen Warren, Isaac Guerrero, and Ray Davis are top running back ads of the week. And let's go into our wide receivers. And I'll start with my guy. And my guy I talked about last week. And this guy has been amazing. He's been consistent. And this guy is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. I told you that he was going to go north of 12 plus points this last week. For this week, he does. He finished with 21.1 points. This guy's 27% owned. He has had 8 touchdowns in 8 games since the bye week, averaging 17.87 points a week in the last 3 weeks. You go look at the rest of the season. He goes on to face Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Jacksonville. A lot of division games, but a lot of teams who don't have good defenses. I'm treating him as a low-end wide receiver 1, very low-end wide receiver 1, but a solid wide receiver 2.
Yeah, I mean, you can't hate the pick at all. He scored touchdowns in 3 straight games, had 2 last game. So he's been balling, and that's a big reason why I think that Will Levis is a guy that I targeted in the quarterback waiver wire department. So, yeah, you can't hate it at all. I don't have the number exactly, but I would love to see the wide receiver that he has been the past 3 weeks because it's got to be top 10.
I think he finished as a top 24 running back in two of those last 3 weeks, I believe. I'm quickly looking, trying to find him. He finished as a wide receiver 10, wide receiver 24, and wide receiver 8.
Oh, okay. So
he's consistently getting you wide receiver 1 numbers,
Yeah.
and then 1 wide receiver 2 number, low end wide receiver 2. That's why I think you could treat him as a low end wide receiver 2, but a wide receiver 1 and a solid wide receiver 2.
Exactly. So on average, the past 3 weeks, he's been the wide receiver like 13, we'll call it. That's pretty good for your waiver wire pickup, who's only 27% owned. So
yeah. I'll go into Keith's pick, and this guy is a guy that actually, Gary, you mentioned earlier with your quarterback. It is Mr. Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen, he came back from the injury. Guy's 34. He's washed. Maybe not. He did come back, and he only scored 8 points against Kansas City. But this past week, he finished as a top 10 wide receiver. Adam Thielen continues to ball out when needed. 23.9 fantasy points this past week. Had 10 targets, caught 8 of them, just 1 yard shy of 100 receiving yards, and he found the end zone. I think this is a guy that's can consistently be putting up numbers to close out the season. But if you're in a dynasty league, I don't see much value for him. But again, we're only talking about redraft, so I think he's a good pickup if you're in need of a wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, how can you not love what he's been doing? I mean, ever since he got to Carolina, he's been balling. His entire career, he's been an underrated wide receiver. I don't know if people know, but last year he went north of 1,000 yards with Bryce Young and whoever else they had at quarterback. So he's been balling. He looks like he hasn't missed a step since he left Minnesota. I think that, he's available in 50% of the leagues. He has to be on teams' rosters going into the playoffs because we saw Deontay Johnson, being able to break out randomly at some points during the season. I think that Adam Thielen could do exactly what he did, and we just saw it last week.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, it's really also depending on Bryce Young and whether David Moore is also going to be that guy.
For sure.
Gary, we'll go with your guy. Who is your pick this week? And we've mentioned him one other time, and that was actually Keith. And of course, you had to pick him up again. And this guy, man, he is a killer for graphics. I still tell you, that guy's name is so long.
Yes, it is. My guy is Marquez Valdes-Scantling, a guy that was being called for last year to be dropped and was getting ridiculed all last year because of how bad he was for Patrick Mahomes. But this year, he's with the New Orleans Saints and has been doing pretty good. 11.6 points last week. He's 41% rostered, so he's out there for a majority of you. I have no problem with agreeing that he's extremely touchdown dependent, as he hasn't caught more than 3 passes since joining the Saints 5 weeks ago. He hasn't caught more than 3 passes in a single game since joining the Saints 5 weeks ago. However, he's caught a touchdown he has caught at least 1 touchdown in the last 3 games. His totals in those games: 25.9 versus Atlanta, 16.7 versus Cleveland, and 11.6 versus the Rams. Now, I'm not saying he's going to catch a touchdown every week. That's pretty idiotic. But I believe that every week that he does play, there's definitely a solid chance for him to, because the Saints somehow continue to just find these deep threat wide receivers out of thin air. Right now, it's Marquez Valdes-Scantling.
I agree with this solely because Taysom Hill is out for the season. Obviously, Taysom Hill has been the guy that's eaten up a lot of rushing work, a lot of receiving work, and, of course, some passing work from Derek Carr. Now that he's gone, again, now there needs to be a new guy that comes in and gets more targets. And Marquez Valdes-Scantling has shown that he can produce with the ball. So I think we're going to see more targets and more receptions, hopefully, for Valdes-Scantling. So I actually really like this pick a lot.
Thanks.
Just going back quickly to the Thielen mentioned by Keith, I was curious on his pace that he was on. Adam Thielen's pace out of only the 5 games he's played, which obviously the first 3 weeks was horrendous by Bryce Young, but he did play those 3 games. He's currently on pace to finish as the wide receiver 26 or 25 if he played 12 games this season.
Pretty
So
good.
a very low end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 though, flex play.
Yeah.
So just a thing to keep in mind. Of course, Nick Westbrook-Akeen, Adam Thielen, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling, our top wide receiver ads of the week. Hopefully Valdez-Scantling is over 70% owned, so I don't have to put him in a graphic again. But I feel like we're going to talk about him next week because I feel like he's going to pop off as well.
Probably.
Let's go into our tight ends. And tight ends have been a little brutal because there's some tight ends that we can't talk about because they're on a bye week.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Zach Ertz just got over 70% owned. Hunter Henry, I was thinking about talking about this week. Can't talk about him because he's on a bye week. So, Gary, none other. I know this is a little gray area again of this topic, but please enlighten who your guy is.
Talked about him last week, and I'm going to do it again. It's Noah Gray. And like I said last week, you may not think that we were ever going to talk about a Kansas City tight end not named Travis Kelce. Well, here we are. Put up 9.8 points this past week. Nothing crazy, but solid tight end numbers this year especially. He's only 18% rostered, so he went up a little bit from last week, but he's still out there in a majority of leagues. He didn't catch a touchdown last week, but he didn't need one as he still had a solid week. And I had previously mentioned how the only thing missing was the targets, as he hadn't had over 5 all year. That stood true until this week. He only had 6, so it wasn't a huge increase, but it shows that Mahomes recognizes Gray's production as of late and sees him as a weapon that he can probably use at any point in games. So I think that Noah Gray's production is increasing. I think that the opportunity that he has is increasing. And obviously people out there agree with me, as I believe he was 6% rostered last week, and that tripled this week. So
I said it last week that I wasn't too confident on him. And I said if he did produce, that I might have to side with you. He did produce, so I'm going to have to keep my word, and I do have to side with you. And I think Noah Gray has been pretty good. And I think, again, like I mentioned last week of the possibility of running the 2 tight end sets, I think this is something that we're going to continue to see with Kansas City. So I think this is something that is fine to have Noah Gray on your fantasy team, which would sound like a stretch in recent years. But I think Noah Gray has been able to produce, and Travis Kelce looks like Father Time might be catching up to him. But yeah, I like Noah Gray a lot this week. This week, not last week, but I do now. I'll talk about my guy, and this guy was talked about a lot earlier this season. He went over 70% owned, and he's now dropped under 70% owned. This guy's name is Tucker Kraft, and you know, he's been crafting up a lot of things because he's still a tight end 6 on the season. Yeah, he's somehow a tight end 6, but is not finished as a top 10 tight end since week 8. That sounds so bad. Sounds actually terrible. But when he does get the ball, he is efficient. And he's had back-to-back weeks with double-digit points. He's taking on Detroit, where he put up 7.6 points. Again, this game, I believe, and I think we all believe, is going to be a high-scoring affair versus last time these two teams faced earlier this season. And I think we're going to see a lot more of Tucker Kraft this year, or this season, this week coming up.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. He started the year on fire. I remember that he was probably one of the better late-round tight ends. If you got him or you picked him up off waivers, you were pretty happy with his production. A guy I feel like is kind of in the same spot as Jonnu Smith. I mean, we can't talk about him no more because he's over 80% rostered. But he's the tight end number 5, and kind of has the reverse season of Tucker Kraft. I feel like started the season off pretty slow, but past 3 weeks he's had 20 plus points. I think that it's literally the reverse end of what we saw from Tucker Kraft. But Tucker Kraft, as you mentioned, is still tight end 6 somehow. So he's got to be on teams, he can't be under 70% owned.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how we've seen the tight ends fluctuate this
Yeah,
season back and forth.
exactly.
And I feel like we've had more tight ends to talk about than running backs this year.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Hopefully that continues and maybe we'll see an uptick in running backs next year, but we'll see. Gary, would you like to talk about Keith's pick, who I believe he mentioned a few times this season? He's definitely been mentioned a few times in our show.
Yeah, I've talked about him a couple times. I think he has as well. I've also talked about that position as a whole because I mentioned Eric All in the past, who ended up going down, which is possibly a reason for the big production increase in Keith's guy, Mike Gesicki, coming off of a 10.3-point week last week. I think that, honestly, personally, I'm a big fan of getting all the Bengals guys on rosters just due to the fact that their offense is so high-powered. And Burrow this year has seemed to really like throwing Mike Gesicki's way. So I think that, as long as the Bengals are still trying to win, even though, they might look out of the playoffs right now, they're still going to try to win ball games as much as they can. I think that Mike Gesicki needs to be owned because he puts up some really, really solid weeks.
Yeah, I mean, he's been having some hot and cold weeks, but recently has been doing really good. And again, I still think Cincinnati has a high-powering offense. I know their record doesn't seem it, but they do have a high-powering offense, and I think we're going to continue to see Mike Gesicki being involved in that offense.
Yeah.
It's also crazy though to see Jonnu Smith being way up there.
Yeah, I know. I figured I had to shout him out because I was personally curious to see what percentage he was owned, and it had gotten up to 81%. But yeah, I honestly I knew that he was going off, but I didn't think he was going. I think the last 3 weeks have been 21 plus points each week. Like, that's blasphemy.
It was insane. I went to see the tight ends and how they produced this week, and I see Jonas Smith up there again. And I know Keith talked about it. I was like, oh, let me go look at him. He must not be 70% owned. And he's way above 70% owned. I was just completely shocked.
Yeah.
But, of course, our top tight end ads of the week, Tucker Kraft, Mike Gesicki, and, of course, Noah Gray to round out the waivers. And, of course, Gary's favorite segment.
That it is.
Gary, would you like to intro this segment?
Let's do it.
Go for it.
Night football predictions, baby. We're back. It is the best segment on planet Earth. Got the Packers going into Detroit. Over-under set at 51.5. Listen, I'm coming off of a great Thanksgiving Thursday. I believe I swept. Am I right in that? 6-0?
You are correct.
Narrowing Keith's lead, narrowing my deficit. Now just one game, I think. Yeah, just one game. So it's getting close. It's getting close. However, you still got some ground to cover.
I very much have some ground to cover. I've now been taken over by Gary in second place. I fall and drop this past week. 14-16 is my overall record. I have struggled this season getting the over-under and the record right in both sides. But Gary, of course, mentioned he's only one game behind Keith, and he is. 16-14 is Gary's record, and 17-13 is Keith's record. Keith's record overall for this week, he's taking the Lions over. 30-26 is his final score. Of course, the over-under this week against the Packers-Lions is 51.5. Gary, who is your prediction?
As much as I would love to try to get this point back and even potentially take the lead, much as I love my Packers as well, I can't go against Detroit. They're like a well-oiled machine right now. I think it's going to be a close one. I think everybody is going to agree with that. We're going to have a great Thursday night game coming up in a couple of days. But enough talk. Then I got the Lions winning 33-30, hitting the over.
I have been bouncing back and forth, and while you were talking, I was still debating whether or not I wanted to put Packers as my team. I just don't see a world where I can go against the Detroit Lions because the Detroit Lions have just been amazing, absolutely amazing this season, and of course, this past 2 seasons overall. I'm taking the Lions. I'm hitting the over. Give it to me, 29-28. A 1-score difference. I've also been battling back and forth between these damn numbers. I was thinking 33, 31, 30-29. Now I'm like, you know what? 29-28 sounds right.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a close one for sure. I can't wait to watch it. I know a lot of fantasy owners will be tuning into this game, so should be a good one.
Very much so. I know a big friend who you're actually in school with still, Nick. He's a big Detroit Lions fan.
Yes.
So if you want to talk trash about him, Gary, about the Lions.
Yeah, well, I don't think right now is the time.
He's been a very big Lions fan. So shout out to him for being loyal to his team, even in the darkest days. Just like how, Gary, you are currently still down in the darker days.
Yes, I am.
Don't know when you'll be back from it.
Probably never.
Oh, man. Well, this is what I give to the Cleveland Browns.
There it is. There it is.
Anyways, that's going to do it in this week's episode. Of course, week 13 is in the books. Week 14, the final week before your playoffs for fantasy football. Hopefully these ads of the week helped you, and hopefully you can smash another win and maybe just sneak into the playoffs if you're still looking for that last win. Now, if you haven't done so already, go use that code SportsTimeHQ on Underdog Fantasy. They're going to match your first deposit up to $100. And of course, if you haven't done so already as well, go to trophysmack.com/SportsTimeHQ and go get yourself a ring, a trophy, or a belt. As much as I want to say, you could also donate a toilet bowl trophy to Gary. Maybe
to yourself.
No. Oh, yeah, maybe it can be to myself. Because I am now in 3rd place in our Thursday Night Football predictions. But again, trophysmack.com/SportsTimeHQ. We're here every single week on Tuesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you want to make sure to follow us, but you can't watch us live on YouTube, go to Apple Podcasts, go to Spotify. We're on there. Right after the show, you can see all the breakdown of all the show segments. And if you want to go check them out specifically. I was joined by my great co-host, Gary. Go follow him all over social media at GDPicks. And, of course, Keith. Again, he was benched this week once again. But hopefully, he'll be back next week. Go follow him all over social media at SwampDonkey_90. I'm your host, Fernando. I was joined by my great co-host, Gary. You can follow me all over social media at SportsTimeHQ. And we'll see you all next week.